Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming tonight. I'd just like to welcome you to the kickoff of our Fall Author Series at Darien Library. We are just overjoyed with the lineup of wonderful authors that we have coming here in the next few months, starting with our program this evening, of course, and our entire series is made possible by contributions to our annual campaign. So thank you so much for your continued support at the library. Tonight, our speaker is a man who's been described by critics as delightful, self-deprecating, slightly neurotic, and a man so funny he can make watching his beard grow hilarious. He is currently the editor-at-large of Esquire magazine, a contributor to NPR, the founder of Mental Floss magazine, and in recent years he's been the New York Times best-selling author of two just completely fascinating memoirs, and here to speak about the third one this evening. His first book, The Know-It-All, in that book he decides to read the entire Encyclopedia Britannica from A to Z, in a quest to become the smartest person in the world. And in his second book, The Year of Living Biblically, he decides to follow the tenets of the Bible as literally as possible for an entire year, which I can imagine, much to the delight of his wife, had him doing some pretty crazy things, including building an 8-foot hut in the center of their living room in their cozy apartment, and him walking around Manhattan with a full beard, a cloak, a wooden staff, and a sheep on a leash. With each humble quest, our author has brilliantly been able to combine hilarity with thought-provoking conclusions about life. And with his new book, just came out last month, The Guinea Pig Diaries, My Life as an Experiment, certainly no shortage of hilarity, wit, and wisdom that he shares with the readers. This book, I can honestly tell you, is laugh out loud funny, and I have no doubt that, like me, you will want to read this book, reread it, and then run out and tell all of your friends that they have to read it as well. It's quite an experience to be had. You'll be asking yourself, how the heck does he come up with these experiments? How on earth does his wife put up with him? And what might his next experiment be? So we are so happy that he's here to answer these questions for us and more tonight. And I'm so just overjoyed that I can introduce him to you this evening, our speaker, A.J. Jacobs.
Thank you. Thank you, Erica. Thank you so much. Hello, thank you very much. Thank you for coming. And thank you to the Darien Public Library. This is an amazing space. And thank you to Erica and also my friend Jen Fallon, who's been my publicist, my unofficial publicist here in Darien. And my wife and son, my oldest son, are here. There they are. There you go, see? Anyway, I thought tonight I would talk a little bit about my first two books, and then talk about the new book is a collection of 9 different life experiments I did on myself. So I would just talk about 3 of them briefly, and then I'd open it up to any questions you guys might have about anything at all, or any of the other experiments. Basically what I like to do is I like to really dive into my projects, immerse myself in them, and become a human guinea pig, hence the title of the book. My first big experiment was reading the Encyclopedia Britannica from A to Z. And this one came about for 2 reasons. First, because I felt that after college, my IQ was taking a swan dive, a slow swan dive, but every year I would lose 1 or 2 IQ points. And I felt I had to do something drastic. And I got the idea to read the encyclopedia from my dad, who started to read it when I was in high school, but he only made it up to the middle of the letter B. around Boomerang. So I felt that I should try to finish what he began and remove that black mark from our family history. So that's what I did. I sat down and bought the encyclopedia. And it was actually a far more overwhelming project than I anticipated, because, I mean, it's a pretty long book. It's 33,000 pages, and if you stack the volumes up, it reaches about 4'8" around here to my chest. So, as I say in the book, it's a Danny DeVito of knowledge. But I did. I had no life for a couple of years, but I did. I was able to read it from Aak, which is the first word in the encyclopedia, which is it's a type of ancient Korean music, just so you know. And I read all of the 44 million words right up to Ziviech. That's the final word in the encyclopedia. And that one is, well, I don't want to ruin the ending in case you haven't read the book. It's a very exciting twist ending, like an O. Henry novel. It's actually a town in Poland, just so you know. But hopefully there are other reasons to read the book. And it was a wonderful. It was a fascinating year. It was, as I say, totally overwhelming, but. I learned so much, and perhaps I learned too much, because my wife, after a while, started to fine me $1 for every irrelevant fact I inserted into conversation. So she made quite a bit of money on the year as well. The other thing about it was that I stuffed so much information in that some of it is still stuck in there. I've forgotten a tremendous amount. But you throw enough at the wall, and some of it is going to stick, and some of it even I wish I could get out. Like, I wish I could forget that opossums have 13 nipples, but that's stuck in there. I wish I could forget that Rene Descartes had a fetish for cross-eyed women, but I never will be able to. That's my curse. But overall, in addition to learning those sort of bizarre arcana, I did learn some really profound things that changed my life for the better. And I'll just give you a couple of examples. One was that I learned just how ignorant I am, which was quite stunning. I mean, there was so much information and so many things that I had barely heard of or not heard of at all. In the letter T, I learned about the Taiping Rebellion. And I had just heard that phrase maybe, referenced a couple of times, but I had no idea what it was. It turns out it was a war in China in the 1860s, right? Same time as our Civil War. And it was a man who believed that he was the second coming of Christ. And he led a revolution against the Chinese Empire. And in this war, 20 million people died, which was a mind-boggling number to me. I couldn't believe that I had never heard of this event that was so cataclysmic in human history. So it was a real eye-opener. One thing, though, I had heard of, the man who had put down the Taiping Rebellion was a man named General So, who you might know from his chicken recipe. So that was pretty much my only connection to the Taiping Rebellion. So now I have a little more. So that was fascinating, just to see the sort of the level of my ignorance. And also, it was fascinating to see that I thought, and after reading the encyclopedia, I would never want to read another book again. That I would be sated. That would be the end of it. But actually, it was quite the opposite. It was really fascinating. It was. I got a little taste of all of these wonderful topics, and I wanted to know more. It whetted my appetite. In the W's, I read about a woman named Virginia Woodhull. I don't know if you've heard. Some you might have heard of her. She's a woman who was a pioneer in women's rights. She was the first woman to run for president. She was the first female stockbroker, and she was also a renowned psychic. which I thought is a good combination, a psychic stockbroker, because I would invest with her. But anyway, they just had a couple of paragraphs on her in the encyclopedia, and it inspired me to go out and buy a biography on this amazing woman. The other final point I want to make about reading the encyclopedia is just that it was a really life-affirming experience, in a sense, because I started at the beginning, and I read all of human history, the thousands of years. So I got to see the highs and the lows. The lows, the Taiping Rebellion being just one of them, and in the end, when I finished the Z section, I do think, looking back, that the highs outweighed the lows, and it was a really it made me more optimistic about our species. And even with the horrors of the 20th and 21st century and the world wars, even there, we are so much better off than we were as a species 10,000 years ago, when the chances of being killed by another human being were 1 in 3. So progress really is real, and it just gave me a lot more hope. And by the way, my friends, Darien residents, the Fallons, make it into that book under the letter Q. So if you want to see them, their little appearance there. It's where one of the plots of the book is we're trying to, my wife and I are trying to get pregnant, and we found out that we got pregnant right here in Darien, Connecticut, at their house. So, thank you. So it was a wonderful experience overall, despite the pain and the pain of, say, reading 32 pages about Portuguese literature. Nothing against Portuguese literature. I'm just saying 32 pages was quite a bit. So there were parts of reading the encyclopedia very difficult, but overall it was a great experience. And it made me want to do another one of these projects. So that was when I decided I'm going to try to live biblically for a year. And this one came about because I grew up with no religion at all. As I say in the book, I'm Jewish in the same way the Olive Garden is Italian. So not really. But I became increasingly interested in religion. We had my son Jasper, and I wanted to know what to teach him about our heritage. And so I decided one way to learn about the Bible would be to actually live it, to try to learn about it from the inside out. So I bought a stack of Bibles, and I got a board of spiritual advisors. I got priests and rabbis and ministers, and I wrote down every single rule that I could find in the Bible. And as you might imagine, this was quite a lot of rules, hundreds of them. And I wanted to follow them without picking and choosing, because that was the whole point of my experiment. Which will make my life better, and which will maybe not be relevant, or even make my life worse. So I wanted to follow the famous ones, the 10 Commandments, and love your neighbor, and be fruitful and multiply. And by the way, I was fruitful and multiply during that one as well. We had twin sons, so I take my projects very seriously. But in addition to those famous ones, I wanted to follow the lesser-known laws of the Bible. The Bible says that you should not shave the corners of your beard. And I didn't know where the corners were. So I just let the whole thing grow, and it was quite, right down to the middle of my chest. I got at least 3 or 4 ZZ Top comments per week. I'll put it this way, I spent a lot of time at airport security. So that gives you a sense. And I won't go into too much detail, but I did keep the beard after my year. It's in a little plastic bag. But my wife doesn't like me to talk about that, so I won't. She makes me keep it hidden far away in a drawer. But anyway, the Bible also says that you cannot wear clothes made of mixed fibers. This is in the Old Testament. And I thought this was so bizarre. It seemed like real micromanaging. You know, why would God care if I wore a polycotton blend? But I thought, there's no way for me to know whether there is any meaning in this rule unless I try it. So that's what I did. I got rid of my polycotton clothes. And by the way, one of the more unexpected things from the year was that I did start to find meaning in some of the more bizarre laws that seemed bizarre when I started, but they really started to change my life for the better by the end. Not that one in particular. That one still remains mind-boggling to me. The Bible, the Hebrew Scriptures also say that you should stone adulterers. So I figured I should at least try that. And I am proud to say I was able to stone one adulterer. I'll just tell you quickly how I was checked that one off the list. That one I was, as Erica was mentioning, I was really getting into character by the middle. So I had my beard and my robe and sandals, and I was walking around in Central Park, and a man came up to me and said, "Why are you dressed like that?" And I explained to him, I'm trying to follow all the rules of the Bible, from the Ten Commandments right on down to stoning adulterers. And he says, "Well, I'm an adulterer. Are you going to stone me?" And I said, "Well, yeah, that'd be great." He offered. So I said, I took out a handful of stones that I had in my pocket because I had been waiting for this moment. I've been, for months. And I showed him the stones, and they were on the smaller side. I thought, they're more like pebbles, but I thought that still counted. But he was an aggressive adulterer. He grabbed the stones out of my hand and threw them at my face. So I thought, an eye for an eye, I could throw one back at him. So that was the way I stoned my adulterer. And it was an odd experience, but it did allow me to grapple with some of the bigger issues I was trying to wrestle with during this year. Just one of them was, how can the Bible be so wise and compassionate and merciful in some parts, and yet so seemingly barbaric in others, talking about stoning homosexuals and adulterers. And that was one of my favorite parts of the year, is that I really did get to wrestle with some of these bigger issues. And it really did change my life in an extremely profound way. And I do things very differently than I did before that year. And I'm happy to talk about that more in the question and answer. I'll just give you one small example, which is that it really changed my perception of gratitude. And this was because the Bible talks about prayers of thanksgiving. It's a really important part of living biblically, is saying these prayers of thanksgiving. And I got carried away. So I would be saying prayers of thanksgiving all the time, like dozens, hundreds of times a day. I would, for every little tiny thing, I'd press the elevator button and I would be thankful that the elevator came. I would get in the elevator and I would be thankful that it didn't plummet to the basement. So I got a little carried away. And it is a bit of an unusual way to live. But there's also something very wonderful about it, because you do start to become aware of all of the things that go right every day that we just take for granted. And there are hundreds of things that go right every day. And I, at least, focused on the 3 or 4 that went wrong. So this was a radical change in perspective, and it has, I try to keep it. It's a struggle, because the mind, I think, does automatically go to the negative in sort of the default mode. But being able to grasp all those things and be aware of them, all the things that go right, it's made my life infinitely better. So at the end of that one, once again, I thought that there's something really great about doing these experiments. They're bizarre, and my wife, is a saint for putting up with them. But at the same time, they do they do make my life better. And I think that the whole idea of experimenting with your life, I think that it can benefit everybody. And they don't have to be big experiments. They can be just little changes. During this, for the new book, in one of the chapters, I examined every decision I made throughout the day. And one of them was my toothpaste. So I realized that I didn't choose my toothpaste for any rational reason. I brushed with Crest because some guy in my summer camp who seemed cool, he brushed with Crest. So I was like, all right, I'll do it. But I hated the taste. I'd been doing it for 30 years, and I hated the taste. It was medicinal. It was not pleasant. So I tried a lot of different maybe, I tried maybe too many. I tried, 40 or 50. But I did find this one that's fantastic. It's like a revelation. It's this, it's apricot flavored. It's Tom's of Maine apricot flavored. And it's like a little treat. It's like having a little delightful meal in the morning and at night. So even those little changes can make your life better. So I'm all for this idea of experimenting with your life and getting a fresh perspective on these things that we just do sort of mindlessly and in default mode. And actually, a couple of weeks ago, I was speaking in Seattle, and a friend of my wife's was talking to me about this idea, and she said that her newborn daughter, who's 5 months old, for the daughter, every day is like Paris. That's how she put it, which I thought was lovely. Every day is full of wonder and awe, and even the most mundane things, like, she sees a sock, and she's like, oh my God, a sock. And that, I think, is to be able to recapture that wonderment and awe is a wonderful goal. And one way to do it is to try to gain a fresh perspective by trying new things as often as possible. So that's what I tried to do with this book. This is a collection of experiments that they usually lasted about a month. And I'll just go over 3 of them briefly, and then you can ask about any of the others if you want. One of the earliest ones I did was when I outsourced my life. This was a couple of years ago. I hired a team of people in Bangalore, India, to do everything for me. So they answered my phone, and they answered my email, and they argued with my wife for me. They read bedtime stories to my son. And it was fantastic, because I just spent the whole month reading books and watching movies, and they were great. And plus, they were better at arguing with my wife than I was. They were much more diplomatic. So that one was a success. That one was a big change for the positive. I did another experiment that was on the other side of the spectrum, and this one was I joined a movement for a month called Radical Honesty, and this is a movement that believes that you should never lie, but more than that, whatever's on your brain should come out of your mouth. There should be no filter. So I tried that for a month, and it was horrible. That one was dreadful. And actually, it's basically like, you see it in pop culture now. Kanye West, it's basically, he practices radical honesty. And then there's this new movie with, now I forget. Yeah, Ricky Gervais, that's basically the same idea. Whatever's on your mind comes out of your mouth. And I have to tell you, it's a dangerous way to live. I remember we went to a restaurant, my wife and I went to a restaurant, and we ran into some old friends of hers from college. And they said, oh, we should all get together, we should have a date. And I had to say what was on my brain, which was, no thanks. You seem nice, but I have no interest in ever seeing you again. And they, shockingly enough, were offended. And they stormed out, and Julie wanted to strangle me. So, not always the best idea. I did a lot of apologizing after that month. There were quite a few phone calls and emails. On the other hand, there are parts of it that are liberating, that I still try to practice. One, I try to be more radically honest about myself and my flaws. There were parts that were successful. I remember talking to my friend, and I said to him, I was having lunch with him, and I said, I have to be honest, I'm insulted. You did not invite me to your wedding. And he said, yeah, but you didn't invite me to your wedding. And I said, oh, really? Like, this was news to me. I said, I totally forgot. And I was like, I'm sorry, that was a mistake. And it was exciting, we hugged. Well, we didn't really hug. But had we not been so repressed, we would have hugged. It was a sort of like this emotional breakthrough. So that I think we can push our relationships further with honesty. And then there's also radical positive honesty. I think being totally open about the positive things. People think of honesty as being brutal honesty. But what about being appreciative? I would, during this month, I called one of my first editors at a small, tiny newspaper in California and told him how much I appreciated him and his mentorship. And that kind of honesty, I think we can do a lot more of. And I will say that one of the highlights of the month was interviewing the founder of the Radical Honesty Movement, who is one of the great characters I've met in my life. He's a psychologist in Virginia named Brad Blanton. And the great thing is, he has to answer any question you ask. And also, you can say anything that's on your mind. And I felt it was almost an insult to this guy if I held back. And so, I'd ask him a question, and he would be in the middle of answering it, and I would say, I'm bored. And he would say, oh, thank you very much. By the way, I don't practice radical honesty anymore, so you don't have to tell me if you're bored. But yeah, he was a fantastic character. And by the way, he has been married 5 times. So that's a little insight into how radical honesty and marriage are sometimes not the best bedfellows. But a fascinating man who had 4 or 5 bourbons during our discussion. So that also apparently helps with radical honesty. I thought I'd briefly talk about an experiment that I did called unitasking. And this one is the opposite of multitasking, as you might have guessed. And I did this because I felt that multitasking was really taking over my life. And I was an incorrigible multitasker. I would be on the phone while driving, naturally. I would be texting while peeing. So unless I was doing 3 or 4 things at once, I felt I was being inefficient. I'm not as bad as the actress Jennifer Connelly, who I read in a magazine recently. She had a quote that said, sorry about this. Thank you. When I'm having sex, I like to talk on the phone or watch TV. You can get so much done. So I felt that was sort of a symbol of how far our society has gone in the wrong direction. And I felt bad for her husband, I hope he had something to do while this was going on, like a crossword puzzle or something. I don't want her to be the only one. But anyway, I decided a month of only single tasks. That was going to be and this was incredibly hard because we were just so addicted to multitasking. So even something like, just taking a shower without listening to the shower radio, that gave me the shakes. Just talking having a phone conversation. This is a revelation. I hadn't had a phone conversation, just a phone conversation in 10 years, and it was I had to blindfold myself because the temptation of answering emails or the internet was just too great. But there was a qualitative difference in my conversation. I was talking to my parents, and I was actually listening to what they said. It was sort of a shocking twist. But I do think that doing one thing at a time, it changed my life. It changed the way my brain was wired. It was weird. I could feel that I was thinking differently. Life was slowing down in a good way. And the more I read these studies on multitasking, the more I realized, it's not really a minor problem. These studies indicate it's like the 11th plague. It's bad. It makes us dumber. It lowers our IQ. One study gave it the number of 10 points. That's how much exactly it lowers our IQ. Who knows if that's exactly right. But it makes us less happy. And the irony is it makes us less productive. We think we're getting so much done, but we're not. We are actually wasting time, because there is really no such thing as multitasking. That's the myth. You think you're talking on the phone and looking at your emails at the same time, but you're really just switching from one to another. So you look at your emails for a few seconds, then pay attention to the phone, then back to the emails. And every time you switch, it takes your brain some time to switch gears. So there's a startup cost. So multitasking actually is incredibly inefficient. So during this month, when I thought, it'll be interesting, I won't get as much done, I actually got more done. So it is something. Of course, I've backslid. I'm back to multitasking somewhat. I'm not multitasking now. I'm totally focused on you guys. But overall, I've cut down on it, and I think that is a good thing. I thought I would end by talking about the final experiment in the book, which is actually an experiment that readers suggested to me. And I get a lot of suggestions, which I love. I love getting suggestions from people on what I should do. I get, for some reason, a lot of people have the same suggestion. They want me to try all the positions in the Kama Sutra, which my wife Julie put the kibosh on very quickly, which actually is okay by me, because I think it would be very painful. It looks like some of those things would throw out your back. So I'm okay with that. But this one is was suggested by readers, and it's basically that I should pay my wife back for all that I've put her through, because she has been very patient as I try these explorations. Just to give you one example, during the year of living biblically, the Hebrew scriptures say that you should not touch women during a certain time of month. And if you take it really literally, if you take Leviticus really literally, you should not sit on a seat where a woman in her time of month has sat. And my wife found this offensive. So she sat in every seat in our apartment when she was in her womanly time. So she is able to get back at me sometimes. But overall, I have put her through a lot. So the idea was that I should do a month following everything that she says. A month of foot massages and Kate Hudson movies. So it was really quite horrible and difficult. But I am glad that I did it, because it was very eye-opening, and it may not have made my life better, but I do think it made our marriage better. And one of the things that was very it was interesting but dangerous at the same time is that Julie made us write down a list of all of the chores that we do around the house. And I honestly believed I was sort of pulling my own weight, but when it was in black and white, it became clear that this was not the case. I mean, she was doing all these things I didn't know existed. I thought those liquid soap dispensers just magically refilled. Who knew there was someone involved? And unfortunately, now that has to be me. So it's definitely affected me in that way. I mean, just reading the research, it really was clear that we still cling to sort of a 19th century division of labor in the home, even though in many relationships both spouses are working full-time jobs, which is the case in mine. And even when both spouses are full-time employed, the average woman does 2.5 times more housework and 5 times the amount of child caring. So it is really it is sort of out of whack. And unfortunately now that that's clear in our relationship, I can never go back to those good old days when I was doing 20%. So again, it had an effect. I think good for our marriage, but it's made my life much more of a pain in the ass. But overall, I loved that one. I loved every one of the experiments. I love this one I did about George Washington that I'm happy to talk about, because he had 110 rules of life that he wrote out as a young man, and they're fascinating. They're really relevant. They're all about self-restraint, self-discipline, sacrifice, respect, and also, by the way, no adjusting your private parts in public. That was literally rule number 2 in George Washington's list. And rule number 11. It was so important he repeated it. Apparently a big problem back then. And nowadays too, you watch baseball, you'll see they violate our founding fathers' rules of life. But anyway, I'm happy to talk about that or any other experiment. I loved them, and I thought I would close just by telling you about this is sort of in the middle of my book tour to promote this new book, and the very first event was in Toronto, and a woman came up to me and asked that her book be signed with a quote from my first book, and it's not actually a quote that I wrote. It was Ian Fleming. I was quoting Ian Fleming, and who was in the F section, of course. But it's such a beautiful quote that I thought I would end with it, because it does really capture, I think, my life philosophy in just a short sentence. And the quote is, never say no to adventure, otherwise you'll lead a very dull life. So thank you very much for coming out, and thank you again to the Darien Public Library. And I'm here to answer any questions. Thank you. Yes.
During the month of radical honesty, did you do that month right before outsourcing your life, so that when you had to apologize, the people in India apologized for you? Or did you send your own emails and calls?
That is an excellent question. Should I repeat the question, or did everyone hear it? It was whether I followed the month of radical honesty with my outsourcing month, so I could outsource all the apologies I had to make, which is an excellent point. I actually think I did the outsourcing right before the radical honesty. But yeah, I remember doing quite a few calls afterwards, and this is probably too much information, but I tape recorded the interview with Brad Blanton, the founder of Radical Honesty, and I was on deadline at the time, so one of the interns at Esquire magazine, where I work, transcribed it, and she informed me that I forgot to turn off the tape recorder while I was taking a pee 3 times. So she got to hear that, and you can see in the transcript. So, which I thought was, I had to apologize for, but I thought it was sort of in the spirit of radical honesty. Brad Blanton would approve. Other questions? Yes, in the back.
Well, I have to tell you, you inspired my nephew. He's reading Scholastic Encyclopedia.
Wow! Oh my gosh!
And I was just wondering, have you thought about entering Scrabble circuit?
Her nephew is reading the World Book. That is very exciting. Do you know what letter he's on?
I don't.
Excellent. Well, wish him luck. The Scrabble circuit, I haven't tried the Scrabble circuit, although I did read a lot about it and study it for the encyclopedia. One exciting thing for Scrabble players is that just last year they added a new two-letter word, which, as you might know, two-letter words are key. And this one has a Z in it, so za, as in pizza. So that's a little tip on Scrabble for you. But no, I didn't enter a Scrabble. I did for the know-it-all. I did try out and get on to Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and this one was quite an experience. The nemesis in the know-it-all is my brother-in-law, who is, I think he would tell you himself, he's a bastard. He went to Harvard, and he's very condescending. He's brilliant, but he's incredibly condescending. And he was making fun of me throughout the entire year for my lack of knowledge. And so finally I got on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? And the $32,000 question was about biology. And he was a biology major at Harvard. So I was like, all right, finally, thank God, he'll be useful. So I called him as my lifeline, and he blew it. He did not know the answer. And it was a very bittersweet moment because I humiliated myself on national television, but I brought him down with me. So it was kind of almost worth the $32,000, not quite. But and by the way, just so you know, the answer, the question, if there are any doctors or nurses in the audience, they'll mock me. But it was the meaning of the word erythrocyte, which is a red blood cell. Red blood cell. Yeah. Anyway, I blew that, even though I had read extensively about it in the letter E. Other questions? Yes, sir.
I'm curious what you typically write for Esquire, and the second question is, did you become more religious after your year?
Sure. The first question is about what kind of things I typically write for Esquire. Well, some of these appeared in Esquire, so I have written some that are sort of experiments for Esquire. My most recent experiment I did for them was called Do I Love My Wife? An Investigative Report. And they put me in I went inside an MRI machine, and they studied my brain as I looked at pictures of Julie and as I looked at pictures of Angelina Jolie. Just to see the difference. So that one was and I do love my wife. I do officially, so now it's in black and white. I love her 66%, which is not bad after 10 years of marriage. So I'm happy about that. But so that's what I usually write for. And as for, yeah, well, it definitely did change me in terms of the other part of the question was how it changed. Did it make me more religious, the year of living biblically? And after my year, my wife and I did join a temple, a synagogue in our neighborhood, and it is Reform, and we never go. But so you got the way, but we are members, and we are sending our sons to Jewish school because I do. My feeling after the year was that I don't really care whether they become observant or atheists, as long as they're good people, as long as they're mensches, as we say, as the Jewish people say. But I thought it would be nice to give them a little foundation in religion, a little taste of religion, so that they can choose from a place of knowledge. So that's where I stand. And as for my belief in God, I actually started the year as an agnostic. And during the year, I went through several different phases. So sometimes I was believing very strongly in God. And sometimes I rejected the idea altogether and went towards the Christopher Hitchens side. But in the end, I became an atheist, not an agnostic, but a very different kind of agnostic. My friend, who is a Lutheran pastor, who is one of the advisors on my project, he has a great phrase. He calls it reverent agnostic, because my belief is whether or not there's a God, there's something very important about the idea of sacredness, and that our lives can be sacred, and that the Sabbath can be sacred. I learned to really love the Sabbath, and I still try to practice it. Taking this day off once a week, this sanctuary in time, and prayer can be sacred. I talked about prayers of thanksgiving. So all these things can be sacred, and that's very important to me, whether or not there's a God. So that's where I stand. Yes.
You have a lot of ideas that I have, that my friends have, that you actually followed through and did it. What was like the big bang moment where you said, you know what, I really am going to do it? Instead of talking about it or doing it halfway.
Well, I guess I've always loved George Plimpton, the writer, who would join football teams and baseball teams and see what it was like to do this kind of thing. But I'm not very into sports, so this is sort of my version. These sort of climbing these intellectual Everests and see what happens, see how they change me. And I guess one of the first ones I did that sort of made me realize that this could be that I feel very lucky I can make a living like this. But one of the first projects I did that I actually went ahead with it was about 10 years ago, 12 years ago even, and it was the movie Shine had just come out. I don't know if you remember that movie. It was about a pianist with schizophrenia, and the guy who played him as a young man looked exactly like me. His name is Noah Taylor, and he got a lot of critical attention, and the Academy Awards were coming up. And I found out that he was not going to be attending because he lives in Australia. So I thought, well, that might be interesting to go and see what it's like to be a movie star, go undercover as a movie star. So I went to the Academy Awards, and it was fantastic. It was like, I had people for 4 hours telling me how ingenious I was. I was signing autographs. I was doing interviews, and it was fascinating as well because it totally had a huge effect on my personality. Because all these people were telling me how brilliant I started to believe the hype, even though I knew it wasn't actually me they were talking about, but just the amount of positive feedback I was getting. I felt my ego sort of become warped, and it lasted like 2 days. I remember afterwards I was online at the pharmacy, and people, I was like, what, don't they know who I am? I was furious. But, and it gave me insight into seeing how fame is really dangerous and how it really can warp people's, and sort of why celebrities often become egomaniacs. And so this was one of the first ones that really opened my eyes to this type of writing. Yeah. Yes?
Have you had any experiments that you started out on and either quit or just didn't go, you weren't able to write about it?
Oh, sure. Yeah. There was... the question was about experiments I started but was unable to finish. One of them I couldn't even get off the ground, was that I'm interested in how technology affects human relationships, and what does it mean that we're all communicating by Facebook and over the internet. So I wanted to take that to the extreme and only communicate through technology. So only Facebook, Twitter, and instant messages. And Julie put the kibosh on that one because she said, our niece's bat mitzvah is coming up, and you're not going to Skype your way to the bat mitzvah. You're not going to be in a video monitor at the table. You're going to be there eating the chicken with the rest of us. So she put the kibosh on that. There's another one I wanted to do about reading people's faces, the science of reading people's faces, And there's a great scholar who's, there are a lot of quacks in that industry, but there is one guy who I think is a great scholar named Paul Ekman, whose work actually is the basis for the Fox TV show Lie to Me, which I've only seen once. But anyway, that one, you need to spend a lifetime trying to do that, so it's not something you can do in a month or even a year. So that one, I still want to do it, but that one I couldn't finish.
I think we have time for a couple more questions.
Okay. Yes, sir.
What's next?
Next is, I figure I did the mind with the encyclopedia, and I did the spirit with the Bible. So my next one, I'm going to try to finish that trilogy and do my body. I'm going to try to become the healthiest person alive. So thank you for the laughter. So I'm in the middle of that. So I changed my diet radically, and I changed my, I started going to the gym, which was a difficulty, and I'm trying to address every single part of my body. So even my feet. I recently bought these new shoes. Have you seen these shoes? They look like gloves for the feet. They're totally bizarre and off-putting, but I love them because they're incredibly comfortable. There's a movement of people who believe that we should all be walking around barefoot because our feet were evolved for barefoot walking, not for shoes, and that shoes throw everything off. So these are the closest thing you can get to walking around barefoot in Manhattan without, getting some sort of horrible disease. So that's just one of the things I'm doing. One of like hundreds of little things I'm trying. Yes.
Yeah, I had 3 things, but the second one was on your unitask chapter, and I had so much to say about it, so I'm not going to say that one, except that it changed your life because you're still wearing the...
Oh, this thing?
Yeah.
Oh, well, this is from the library. I don't want to get them in trouble.
But the encyclopedia, because 20 years ago I said I was going to read every biography in a library starting with A, and of course I never did it, so kudos to you for doing it.
Oh, thank you.
But you gave me an idea now that maybe I can go through the encyclopedia instead of going through all the books in the library.
It is more efficient. Yeah, that is.
So
Although this is a lovely library, and it's so easy to check the books out, I noticed. That saves some time for you.
So I'm going to skip to number 3, is how do you see yourself, like a humorist? I mean, you touch so many, psychology, sociology, you touch on so many things in your book that I'm just wondering, how do you see yourself? Do you see yourself as this purposeful, self-evolving, person? I mean, do you see yourself aware of your own steps, or for the purpose of writing the books, or?
Well, yeah, I mean, I certainly, well, thank you for your kind words, by the way. I would say that I am, I love doing these projects, and, I certainly try to make them entertaining, and I don't think I would be doing all of them if I weren't a writer. I mean, I am a writer, so this is sort of something. I had a very dull childhood. My father and mother were pretty, my father was not an alcoholic or a carny. He wasn't a carny. That would have been a good book. So I have to do something interesting, so I have something to write about. So that helps. But I would say that, I don't want it to just be humor, because I only want to do things that are topics that are genuinely riveting to me and that I feel have the potential to change my life for the better. So I do think that there's, sort of this sense of self-improvement that runs through my work, and that's become important to me. And, I don't want them to read like self-improvement books like The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, but I want them to, these things to teach me something about how to live better, and hopefully give ideas to people reading them about how they can live better. One more, sure.
Do you have any special influences
Special influences, like other writers that I like?
Like Bill Bryson has been sort of mentioned.
Yes, I love Bill Bryson, who wrote A Walk in the Woods, which is a great book. I don't know if you've read it, but...
He seems to have your sort of humor, actually.
Well, thank you. I'll take that as a very nice compliment. Yeah, the review for this book, one of the early reviews said that I called me the funniest writer this side of Bill Bryson, but it didn't say which side. So it's like the terrible side. So that gave me a complex. But yeah, I love Bill Bryson. I love George Plimpton. I love. When I was younger, not so much now, I liked Hunter S. Thompson. I read a tremendous amount of nonfiction because when I dive into these projects, I just try to read dozens of books about the topic so I know, it's like a crash course, it's like a major in college, and I just try to become as expert as I can. So, I read lots of religious books, and some that really resonated with me. There's a great religious author named Marcus Borg, who is he's a Christian writer, but he writes about the Bible. He wrote a book called Taking the Bible Seriously, but Not Literally, which I think is a great phrase, and that's sort of how I try to approach the Bible, seriously, but not, because if you take it literally, if you try to do it literally like I did, you'll be stoning adulterers on street corners, and that's a dangerous way to go. But it has lots that can be taken seriously. So those are some of my influences. Well, thank you again for coming, and I would like to come up.